to this computer. All right, here we go. So, hi everybody. Tom Benjamin here. I am beyond excited to talk to Maria Minnis, author of Tarot for the Hard Work, which you can't see this. Oh, there we go. Um, for my money, one of the most important and best books on tarot I've ever read. And it succeeds to me on three different levels. It's an amazing book about tarot. It's an amazing book about anti-racism. It's an amazing book about anti-racism and tarot. And so in this delightfully slim, easy to read package, you get three incredible works of art here. And so Maria, I'm so excited to talk to you. I've been waiting for this book, I feel like my whole adult life. And welcome to this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. And before anything, I just want to say thank you so much for those kind words because I that that's what I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be a book about tarot, but not just for tarot readers, but I wanted it to be a book about anti-racism. And for people who care about both, like I wanted it to be that too. So
Yeah.
thank you for seeing my intention.
Absolutely. I adored this, and you can probably see how maybe you can't dog-eared my copy is. And I was like I realized that I could probably highlight the whole book and that would not serve me at all. But we'll come back to the book in just a second. I can't imagine that anyone watching this doesn't know you by now, but would you just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do and how, well, we'll get to the how you landed on this in just a second, but tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I am Maria Minnis. I am a tarot reader, teacher, facilitator. My work is really grounded in liberating people. And so that looks like liberation from structural racism, liberation from self-doubt and guilt, liberation from internalized racism, liberation from morality culture. And so that's where my work centers on, and I try for that to influence everything that I do. So that also includes the book that you just spoke about.
Hmm, that's wonderful. And I love that you've sort of encapsulated all of those things so easily. Talk about sort of morality culture for a second, because I'm not sure that folks sort of think about the way that even morality and mores are impacted by somewhat outdated and very problematic concepts.
Absolutely. So I don't know when this is coming out, but I'm soon to release a podcast, a little of bite-sized episodes of called Kinky Tarot,
Ah, yes.
and it's a sex-positive space blending both the world of kink and the world of tarot, and how those archetypes can show up in how we liberate ourselves from the idea that we shouldn't want or feel these things or seek an incredibly erotic life. And I don't think eroticism has has to do with sex. And so I'm exploring liberation in that way. I think there are so many shoulds that sort of infiltrate our thinking. And so long as we are doing seeking pleasure in ways that are consensual, aligned, and um, and are not causing any harm,
Mhm.
let's give ourselves permission to feel good. There are so many forces in the world uh, and facts about the world today that don't feel good.
Mhm.
And if we do not make space for pleasure in our lives, then we burn out. And the things that we are fighting for in this world, like nothing we work toward is supported by us burning out. So
Mhm.
I really am seeking to push away from this idea that we always have to work, 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 because that's what makes us good people,
Mhm.
and rest and pursue the things that, you know, make us feel good, even if they're a little weird. And again, not necessarily sexual, but breaking out of what a normal person should find
Mm.
fun or
Right.
interesting, and to explore that. And so that's what where I kind of am around like pushing back against like morality culture, because there's no such thing as like a good activist, or like these are huge umbrellas that we try to, you know, narrow in order to be able to conceptualize in a way that feels manageable and
Mm.
approachable. But what a good person is very expansive, and I seek to inspire people to look at themselves from all sorts of different angles of light and shadow. I call my work holographic because I I refuse to think that there is only one view, for any given thing on this planet. It could be a blade of grass, and we could disagree on how to interact with it or what it
Mhm.
represents and such. And so I am just so interested in using structures such as tarot to really illuminate the different ways that we show up for ourselves and others in this world.
That's so amazing. And I think so powerful for divination-centered folks or divination-centric folks to think about because a lot of our mores, a lot of our norms, a lot of our views about pleasure are influenced by kind of Christo-colonial thinking, right? Like even if we're not Christian, we're impacted by you know, what is pleasurable, we're allowed to experience in terms of pleasure. And so even sort of exploring that concept, breaks down those towers, of institutional, displeasure, of
Yeah.
shaming ourselves, of hiding ourselves. And I love the liberation aspect of that. And for people who have been shamed or marginalized in some way, the idea of pleasure is complicated. And you're sort of making room for this, making room for them, making room for us, which I find so beautiful and amazing. I'm
Yeah,
curious.
thank you.
Oh yeah, you were gonna say some more?
No, I was just thinking earlier today about how so many systems are designed um, intentionally to keep us exhausted, and that prevents us from making space for connection and joy and play. And I think we have every right to push back against that.
I love that. I love that. It's subversive only because of the world we live in, but so is divination. You know what I mean? To sort of
Ooh,
interact with the divine in a personal not I don't love individualism, but at an individual level sort of strips away the need for the institutions that serve as an intermediary. And the word ecstasy, of course, has religious connotations, but so much of religion doesn't make space for that, or at least the white Christian religions that I grew up in. You know what I mean?
right.
I'd love to hear about, if you don't mind sharing your sort of tarot origin story. Sort of how did you,
Yes.
yeah.
So I've been reading tarot for over 2 decades. I started out with a friend gifting me a deck. I didn't have the little white book, and I was honestly more. I've always been kind of a weird, like, I was a psychic. I say like I was a psychic baby, or
Uh,
maybe like a psychic toddler. Like I've just always been like interested in like liminality and intuition. And so with tarot, I started out kind of backwards in terms of like how to learn about the tarot. I developed my own relationships with the cards because I thought it was really interesting to look at these, you know, at this art and interpret what's being said to me. And I think one way that I am sort of evolving my work is talking less about tarot cards individually and more so tarot spreads as stories.
hmm,
And I'm a writer, I'm a storyteller, and that was what really brought me excitement about the tarot. And eventually, I do think that absolutely tarot readers um, need to leverage their intuition in reading, but I think there's also something to be said about the the power of these collective meanings of the cards that have been shaped by so many different people and perspectives and stories. None of us is an island. So I think, yes, I had that intuitive base, but it was also really important for me to learn what the cards mean, what
Yeah.
other people to speak the language of tarot. And so I did that and I started reading for friends and eventually parties. And I decided to go pro or like start charging in 2017. And from there, I've done thousands of readings and I feel like I get as much out of the readings as do my clients.
Hmm.
And tarot is just, it's so integrated into my everyday life. I see the archetypes everywhere. Like, I think you can attach any life experience to a card,
Yeah.
Like, I think the entire range of a life experiences can be reflected in the cards. And so I read tarot, but I like to say I also live tarot.
Oh my God, I love that. I love that it's like you're an artist with tarot cards, so you see the world through that lens.
Ooh,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah, I didn't think of it that way, but
Yeah.
that feels resonant.
Yeah, because an artist starts to think in terms of, like, I'm not an artist, but I used to watch art videos to relax, and they start to see the world in terms of color blocks and shapes and shadows and lights. And if you watch a lot of their videos, you start to see the world that way too. And that's sort of what you're doing with the divination, with tarot as a divination tool and as just a way of being. Um, so it's exciting to hear you talk about it because you can feel it through the screen even, the way that you experience tarot. What advice would you give to someone starting their journey with tarot off the top of your head? I know that's kind of a loaded question, but
If someone is just about to get their first deck and they don't know anything about tarot, but they feel to called to this gift, um, I think the first thing I would tell them is to avoid rigidity. Um,
mm,
earlier I was talking about there are so many internalized shoulds. Like, we should read tarot in this way. We should, always say that, the fool must land at the beginning of the deck. I think the fool can be in between any two cards, because you have to leap from like one one phase into another, one theme to another. And so I would just say, like, don't be super hard on yourself. Like, yes, study the cards and get familiar with them, but if you turn it into a chore, that deck is gonna just sit on your shelf because
mm,
tarot should not be a chore. And if it does begin feeling like that, then I think that sort of blocks your ability to really intuitively connect um, with with the revelations that you can find in the archetypes.
yeah. Oh, I love that advice. Yeah, rigidity is sort of the opposite of curiosity. You know what I mean? And as a reader, you sort of need to be
Ooh.
curious. Um, I'm personally curious if
Wow. Yes. Yes.
oh, sorry, we had a little skipping there. So uh I apologize if it sounds like I'm talking over you. Um I'm curious if there are any decks or books right now that you're really loving.
Right now. Oh, I I love all of my decks, and it's
Yeah.
so silly because, like, who needs a closet full of tarot decks? But here we are.
Yeah.
I've really been energized by returning to Casey Zabala's Wanderer's Tarot.
Mm,
Um, I'm usually not super like I like colors in my decks,
mm.
but wow, that deck is so it, it's a very loud deck, but it's loud and gentle.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I am in my life. Like I need straight talk, but like be nice to me,
Right.
please.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that so much. And I love the way that you use the word energized too. I can tell you're a writer because you just select the greatest words for these descriptions. Let's talk about this amazing book here. So just to sort of get into the origin story of this book, it started as a blog. Yeah, was this how it began for you?
Before it was a blog, it started out um, after the 2016 election and all of the sort of emboldenedness that many people felt from many different directions. Um, I sort of felt like all of these like I wanted to do something,
Mhm.
but a lot of the anti-racism tools that I found were specifically geared toward white people
Mhm.
and is wonderful, right? Like I want those resources to exist, but I also realized that even though, I'm a Black queer woman, I don't come from money or um and so on and so forth. Like I still do have some privileges. Um, you know, living in America is a headache, but it can be seen by other people as a privilege.
Right.
And so like I have educational privilege. And so how do I show up and how can I uniquely show up in my everyday life? Because the world seems like if I think about like dismantling structural racism and I'm like one person and this has been going on, as long as, capitalism has been a thing and even before, um, I it's like I don't I want to do these efforts. Realistically, what I can do is integrate my work into my everyday life. Realistically, I can think about the language I use. I can think about where I choose to shop. I can think about how I show up as a passive or active bystander. So I was like, I don't have an anti-racism guide, but maybe I could create like a structure that helps me sort of approach the topic of anti-racism from different angles because I didn't necessarily feel, and I don't know if I would describe myself as an activist, but I can imagine what the high priestess would look like as an activist.
Mm.
So every Friday I'd sit in this coffee shop near my home and use a pull a card and write like 3 or 4 things that I could do that week while embodying that archetype.
Mm.
And eventually I realized I'm keeping this to myself. I don't see anything like this out in the world. I'll put it on the internet.
Mm.
And so instead of just lists, I wrote fuller articles, fuller blog posts with resources for people. And it became way more popular than I thought it would be. And eventually that turned into this book. And so here we are.
Yeah. I I love the personal journey because the book feels so personal. You know what I mean? And you approach the writing of it with openness and inclusivity too. You make space for a range of folks at different parts of their journey to experience the book. And I think that I mean, I'm so guilty of the like attack mode, You know what I mean? Like I have a lot of unresolved anger for my queerness, you know what I mean, and growing up the way that I did. And so I can instantly go into like, well, go to hell kind of. But that doesn't necessarily invite people into the conversation or even to the point that I'm attempting to make. But this book is sort of a beautiful invitation to explore something that maybe folks don't feel safe talking about until they get into it, but through a tool that they know and they know they feel safe with. I don't know if that makes any sense. Um,
Yes, I felt like what is the structure? What is a structure in my life that makes sense? And the major arcana felt like home to me. So
yeah,
that's where I went naturally.
I and it's you brought up the high priestess, and that was where I started really scribbling and writing. And I think I posted on Instagram a couple of your quotes from the high priestess in particular. But before I talk about why, I want to talk about because you use the word structure. The structure of each chapter of each card is so beautifully done because you give us sort of let's explore the card through a modern lens, and then you use this thing called embodied keywords, which sounds like what you were sort of doing when you were beginning the project for yourself. And it's active. You know, this isn't a passive book. You actively, you say here, pull out the High Priestess card from a deck or several, and then gaze at the imagery and envision yourself in the card's landscape, and then start to think of it through an activated lens, that an experiential lens. And then you transition into the High Priestess and Liberation work. You talk about some correspondences. You talk about how the High Priestess can show up. And then there's an essay for each card that sort of contextualizes the card and tarot and life through the lens of something that needs to be dismantled or reimagined or envisioned. And the first one that made me sort of start snapping was the re-envisioning love and light. And you write here, quite often the love and light perspective conceals devastating truths behind the oppression that enables by spiritual bypassing practices and rhetoric. It's a veil asserting total serenity in a world where peace is often a foreign concept. One of a witch's duties is to effect real change in the real world, and the real world is not all love and light. And I wanted to just stand up and applaud this because I've been such a crank about spiritual bypassing. And it was so exciting to see this so beautifully stated in a mass market book, you know what I mean? And I just wanted to celebrate that, but also, if you would for anyone who's watching this, kind of talk about spiritual bypassing and what it is and the danger of it. Could you boil down this very complicated topic into a quick answer?
No, I have a question you're trying to ask, and I get it.
Yeah.
This I get it. In a nutshell, like I do not shame people for wanting to feel good, wanting ease,
Mhm.
wanting peace, right? Like peace is one of, if not the most expensive thing on earth. We work, we connect, we take time, we rest. Also, we can be able to have what we need to be able to not be stressed out.
Mhm.
Um, and so I get that. And so much, especially when I was writing this book, and especially writing that chapter, I would just go online and, I wanted to stay tapped into the current narratives out there. And I was just inundated with these messages around like there was just this weird juxtaposition, like change needs to happen. We need to change the world. We are witches. We can make the world a better place. And at the same time, uh, there were also messages around hoping, like around love and light, and just like, all we need to do is just spread love and light. And I like love and light too, but in this world, like if you really want to show love, sometimes rage is a form of love. That's, like the things that we do in order to help liberate marginalized people, we might be driven by rage because we love. And light means it's not just it's not daytime all the time.
Yeah.
We have to shine light on ugly things sometimes. And love and light can look like, I think I've said, like it can look like rage and destruction um when facing the oppressor. And I would just be like so frustrated that with the passiveness of the dominant narrative around what love and light is. I think, and I think most people can say, like, change is often difficult and uncomfortable. And love and light in that sort of lens is more like, as long as I keep my peace and stay in alignment with what I need and what I deserve in life, you know, that will somehow radiate. And like, yeah, I think everything we do ripples beyond ourselves. But if you say you want change, then what are you doing wishing love and light on in a world where like people are being oppressed and murdered like
Right.
right now. This is not uh, this work is urgent. And to consider the and to prioritize your own sense of love and light, and to prioritize it in a way that is centered around bringing you peace and comfort is it's not congruent with what we need in the world.
That's such a beautiful answer, and thank you for interpreting my question, my clumsy question, so well. Yeah, like the love and light can be very individualistic and self-centered, and love isn't easy. Love does mean sort of breaking down walls that are hurting people. It is messy. You made me think about a book I've never really liked, The Velveteen Rabbit, with that. I don't know if you know the story, but at the end, the famous rocking horse is like, oh, I look this way because I was loved and I'm falling apart. And sometimes that made me feel like it was sending like a weird message to kids. But in reality, it is we have to get a little messy, we have to get a little vulnerable, we have to get uncomfortable. I mean, being in love with another human being, I can't think of a feeling of being more mortal. You know what I mean? So love and light, yes, but love is difficult, and light means shining a light on things we don't necessarily want to see. um what I people used to ask me, can you use tarot for this kind of work? And I used to say, I don't know if you can, because at least for a lot of white people, I don't know that we have the ruthlessness to look at ourselves honestly that way. You know what I mean? Like I worried that doing this work would be bypassing using tarot, but the book so beautifully gives action, and at the end of each chapter is sort of an opportunity to check in with yourself and to um I opened here to what is, I think, the Emperor, and there's this list of questions that you have at the end of the chapter, like what are your coworkers' salaries? How can you support pay equity? And so often folks feel like, oh, this problem is so big and I don't know what to do. But like right here in the first three, bullets, there are three things I could do right now, and that's what's so exciting too, is that this is an active educational experience. It's an active experience. Well, how I'm trying to sort of articulate my question. Was that always part of the plan, or did you discover sort of the need to make the book active as you were going along? As you were working on the blog, did it evolve, or was it always sort of this well-structured thing?
I I definitely wanted, like, when I had the idea to write this book, when I had the opportunity to write this book and have it published, I knew that I wanted it to be action oriented. I I am guessing you can probably relate. I have a lot of tarot books,
Yeah.
and uh, I reference them all the time. And I appreciate that a lot of those books are evergreen resources. And I thought, well, I want an evergreen resource, but what I'm talking about is not just reading something and then, having that experience and compartmentalizing your time with the book and then putting it away until you feel like reading it again, or, you know, um, never picking it up again. And so I always wanted it to be action oriented. But when I really felt like I got the structure, was when I thought of those like end of chapter building a toolkit
Hmm.
um, sections, because I was like, okay, I'm talking about this topic in a very broad and global way, but what needs to happen, like the change that needs to happen, is more likely going to happen with small, everyday actions that are relevant to the person you are, the relationships you have, and the community you live in.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you can like learn about the school to prison pipeline, but you can more likely do something when you learn about it in your community.
Hmm.
Like you can't just walk up to the White House and, tell the president what you think, but you can go to a school board meeting,
Right.
you know? So I wanted people to really um, personalize their anti-racism work
Hmm.
around like where they are and what they can actually do.
Hmm.
And I really wanted this book not to feel like a scolding. I think, I've grown up in, I've spent all of my, I've always lived in America. And when writing this book, I definitely came up against issues of internalized racism, which was very hard for me. Um, but in writing these activities, I say in the intro, like, I'm doing the work alongside y'all. And so when I was writing these activities, I avoided anything that seemed incredibly unrealistic for me or anyone I know to do, because we're all busy. We all, have things going on, and a lot of us really want to change the world. And in the chariot chapter, I talk about like picking a lane, um, and that's kind of the energy that I'm kind of going with. This is like, where are you now and where can you impact change? If
Hmm.
you're a teacher, how can you influence your school system, your local school system? If you're a mechanic, how might you increase opportunities for mentorship and apprenticeship? Like these are things that you can incorporate into whatever you're already doing.
I love it so much. It's so doable. And I think folks sometimes feel like, I don't know what to do. Well, all you have to do is turn to any page in this book and do just one of the things that day. Like so many folks like me have said, well, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help. Well, start with this. And start by doing one of the activities. You know what I mean? Just start. Like once you start, it's easy to keep going. I think folks sometimes feel like conversations around privilege and that sort of thing, means that they're going to have to sacrifice. And it does, but it's not anywhere near as much as people think it is. You know what I mean? Because the world is so imbalanced. You know what I mean? So, doing little perception shifts that'll open up your mind, is such a good way to start, which is what divination is for anyway.
Yes, yes. I think that, you know, like you said, a lot of people are like, I don't know where to start. And I just want to piggyback off of what you just said about perception shifts. Well, start by noticing. Like that is step one, being aware of the world that you live in and your relationship to that. And not just relationship in terms of like interpersonal connections, but also your relationship to yourself and the way you think and perceive, and shifting mental narratives and such. start with noticing. And I feel like I give in the book um, a lot of things that you can start noticing about your everyday life that does these things that do uphold structural racism, and realize that you can make small little shifts that, you know, that ripple outward and do impact the world in meaningful ways. If we think about like the big issues that we are trying to solve and we get overwhelmed, then why would, it would feel really hard to start because
Right.
it is overwhelming when you think about the big picture. But if you can think of it in terms of how you shift your everyday life, and to do it even just like incrementally, then like if more of us were doing that, then I think that would have more impact than a few people um, just, you know, m- making major, making like one time big actions. Like this has to be a world that we are actively creating every day. And we can't just wait for the next big thing because there's not going to be this sort of, you know, maybe there will be. I can't, I can't promise that a comet's not going to fall out of the sky today and like change everyone's perspectives on the
Right.
value of life.
Yeah.
But but we do see these big moments, we see these big movements, and they sort of fade in and fade away, and people's commitment wanes because they want to go all in when like 2020, for example, that was a really big time where a lot of people went all in. But oh my goodness, was that time freaking exhausting? And I get it. And that's like, of course, the like fervor is going to wane because it's not sustainable. The work we do has to be sustainable in order for it to continue. And again, nobody benefits from you burning out. It
Mm.
has to be sustainable. And that's why the activities I share in the book, they are they're accessible. They are none of them are like turn your town upside down.
Right.
It's like, what if you did this differently? And not just what if you did this differently, but what if you did this differently and other people saw what you were doing and were inspired by that?
Mm.
Because you're not an island, and what you do does affect the people around you. And if it doesn't get them to change the way they live, it does get them to notice.
Yeah.
And that's where it starts.
Yeah. I love that so much. It's such an incredible work and a generous work and I love, the idea of noticing your the forward for your book was written by Rashonda Tramble, who is the creator of Stay Woke Tarot, an amazing person. And it just made me think of that word woke, you know what I mean, and how it's been co-opted by the right in the United States. But it's so it came from liberation, it came from, you know, noticing, from being aware, and the thing that makes me so upset about it is that the co-opting of it, but by the idea of being aware and being awake and noticing is somehow like awful, you know what I mean? But it's what we're here for. And the idea of I guess folks sometimes feel like, well, what if I screw up? What if I do the wrong thing? Then you fix it and you apologize. You know what I mean? You move on and you do better the next time. So many of us get stuck in never starting because we're worried about doing it wrong. But the worst thing that can happen if you do it wrong is someone says, "Hey, that's wrong." You know what I mean? Like, so often that's the biggest consequence you can face.
Oh, and that I love that you just mentioned that because I, for anyone who is like, what do I do? Okay, I start noticing and then I start doing the work. Like, I can almost guarantee you that if you stick to it, you will mess up. Like, you will say the wrong thing, you will do the wrong thing, and that's part of it. You can't giving up because you messed up. That's about your ego. That's not about this big picture we're trying to shift. You dropping out because you feel ashamed, shame is not going to liberate anybody. Like,
Mm.
and it's not going to liberate yourself. So, like, it can't just be about your ego being hurt. Like, you have to accept that, you know, you will mess up and it might feel really freaking bad. That's okay. You're not going to feel bad forever. It's a learning experience. And maybe you had that learning experience for a reason. Maybe you needed that. And no matter what, you have to move on. You've got to keep living. So why not just, dust yourself off and try again?
I love that so much. And that's so, I mean, that's the key to life, I feel like, right there. Because if we're ever going to grow, we're
True
going to
that.
screw up. We have to screw up. We have to learn from those mistakes. Life is an experiment in a lot of ways. Um, it's time for us to start wrapping up, but I wanted to ask something I love to ask that's maybe a hard question to answer. So if you don't have any answer to it, that's fine. But what's something you wish people asked about you more that they don't?
I don't know if I have a question that I wish people asked me, but I wish that people knew that in the real world, I talk about really hard topics, and I can be I understand that I might come off as intense online and such, but like I I laugh all the time. Like I love having fun, and I think joy is a part of the feel. Like I feel joy, so I want other people to feel joy. Like I am a silly human being, and I kind of wish like people knew that about me, because I'm not intimidating. If you like DM me, like I might be slow, but I respond to everyone, and I'm my day-to-day life, I just really lighthearted and optimistic and silly and goofy. Like I loved taking clown classes,
Ah,
and I'm starting improv classes on Saturday in a few days, and or tomorrow. And like I love to play, I love to have fun, and my life isn't all about work, but it's also like I'm smiling all the time because
yeah.
I am so grateful to be able to be where I am. I'm so grateful to be in this body at this place in this time. And so, anyway, that's just to
Yeah.
say I am a much more lighthearted person
I
than people
love
think.
that. I love that so much. And I definitely have felt that from your posts. So and I think I'm grateful that you're in this place as well. I've learned a lot from you. I learned something the other day that I had never thought about before when you posted about how cashless businesses are classist. And I thought, you know what? I never thought about that. Um, so it's time to wrap up. Where can we find you? What have you got going on? What's exciting coming up for you?
Yeah, so I am currently in the process of totally rehauling my business. Lots of new offerings to be announced and shared out later this year. Like I said, I've got the Kinky Tarot podcast coming out, little 15, 20-minute um, bite-sized podcast episodes where we take we not just the major arcana, we go through the whole deck, and we talk about different obscure uh, kinks and like what they might like, how they might illuminate different aspects of a particular tarot archetype. So that's coming up pretty soon. I can be found on Instagram at Feminist. It's FE plus my last name, Minnis, Minnis. You can learn more about me and my work on my website, mariaminnis.com. And like I said, I have I, I have very clear personal boundaries, and they are very strong. And so when I say that like people can reach out to me, I feel safe in saying that, because I am energetically protected, and I love connecting with people. So if anyone on the watching this feels called, like reach out, send me a DM, send me an email, like let's talk, because I think there is nothing like this universe is so huge and it's ridiculously huge and it's wild that like out of all of this space like I can make a connection with you like I like oh we could be anywhere and so
Right.
I think human connection is really exciting so um come find me I'm around.
I love this so much. It's been so exciting and fun to talk to you. I'm such a fan. I adore this book, Tower for the Hard Work. I've been an admirer from afar, and I'm so happy to have this time to like connect with you and share. And I've been beaming the whole time because you're just a joy to listen to, and I'm such a fan.
Ditto. And before we go, I just have to say, I am beaming right now. I am so happy to have had this conversation. You have taught me so much. You have like your approach is very straightforward, unique. There's levity sometimes. Like I am a huge fan of yours, and I am so grateful for you that you have decided to share yourself and your perspectives so freely because you really are like you have made a big impact on my life and how I show up not just as a tarot reader but also as a person and so thank you for this time here together it is my honor for
Oh,
real.
likewise. Thank you so much for that. I'm blushing. I'd love to chat again soon. And next time you have another project, let's talk again. I hope there's another book at some point in the future. No press. But I love your work. I love your writing. And thanks everybody for watching. I'm gonna stop the recording so I can say goodbye to Maria privately. But thanks for watching, everybody, and be good. And let's stop the recording. I don't know how to do that.